game change, yeah.
Welcome to Go Sports Live. I'm Matty Marshall, and excited for the two guests we have today. So we got Ryan Greenspan, legend in this game. In a lot of people's books, the GOAT. Like, if we're talking about skills, repertoire, what you're doing behind the scenes, what you're doing on the field, I mean, we really can't find somebody with more accolades than Ryan Greenspan. He's 42 years old. He also won a Golden Barrel this year at the first event, Dynasty's only win this season. So we need to touch base with him about how his squad is looking heading into Chicago. Historically, they've done very well there. And if they want to contend with Legion for the series title, they really need to step up and have really good showings at both Chicago and World Cup. Also going to be touching base with Ryan Gray, Coach AC Diesel. He's got a great mind for this game. He's been involved with this for a long time and has coached some really solid teams. And to me, AC Diesel is one of the most captivating stories out there. They also need to have a really solid performance at the end of the season, or who knows what's going to happen to that roster. So going to be asking him some of those hard questions. But without any further ado, with about a month to go before the next event, Chicago going to be going down 13th through the 15th of September. Let's check in with Ryan Greenspan. Again, arguably the GOAT in a lot of people's books, Ryan. And, I've people ask me this question because I've been around for so long. As you could see by my bald head and the gray in my beard, as we were kind of talking about a little off camera, because you were like, oh yeah, I need to get a haircut. Got to cut some of these grays away. You're like, oh yeah, kind of looks like the gray in your beard, like just like all over. But so I've kind of seen a lot of paintball and yeah, man, I feel like, because a lot of people look, I love Oliver, and Oliver, if we're talking about big moves, leading multiple teams to championships, I mean, Oliver has to be in the conversation, but just your tenure and the length of time that you've been doing this, the fact that you're still winning MVP awards at your advanced age of 52 years old is just absolutely a giant testament to your skills, and also a big, I feel, boost to anyone that's out there. We were both coaching the Narcos this week, and I was, thank you for hitting me up, so I'm helping the D3 line. And some of those dudes are 38 years old, and I used you as an example. I'm look at old man Greenspan. He's out there still crushing it, elite, the tip of the spear at 42, bro. Like, you can still do this, dude. You're still in good shape. It's 100 billion degrees out here, and we had a couple studs on our line, so it was just kind of cool. So I got to give credit where credit's due. You definitely have had an amazing career, and I feel like you could play till you're 50. Is again, knock on wood. Barring some, so that's kind of my first question. Like, that was the first thing I wanted to ask you about, is that how's the body holding up? How are you feeling? And how are you kind of dealing with this stage of your career? I mean, I first met you, I think, when you were like 15. And so we've known each other for a long time, longer than we haven't. And it's just kind of been cool to see you, do things behind the scenes, helping start Field One, helping manage Dynasty for all these years. And then Dynasty's had its, obviously that run in the early to mid 2000s was pretty amazing, but the leagues, it's way harder now to be dominant. So the run you guys have had since 2020, and I even have some people are like, Matty, stop talking about Dynasty. I'm like, bro, my job is talking about what's happening and who's great. And if Dynasty is whooping that ass and winning half the tournaments since 2020, how can I not talk about them? Especially when the core is 40 years old. That's a great story. That's a story that we'll be telling 20 years from now. It's amazing. So how are you feeling and heading into this Chicago event?
I'm feeling great. I mean, slight lower back pain from carrying multiple children simultaneously. That's the only small thing there on my end. Y'all still there?
Yeah. It just looks like you're having some Doghouse Studios technical difficulties.
No, I feel great.
Also, Spick and Span Show Tuesdays at 4.
I just checked my internet just in case. I clicked on it just in case, and I'm fully ripping. I've got full everything here.
Okay.
So I was like, we just had a little bit of a little snag, and I went onto my thing. I'm like, all right, I've got full bars. I'm cooking. So anyway, I'll just kind of restrict, but that's common theme here. It's easy to point blame here at Doghouse Studios for the for the internet connections. No, but I feel good. My body feels good. It's funny you said how much longer am I going to play? I don't know. It seems like now with extra kids, I got to keep making a living here. So I don't know how long I'm going to be playing, which it's I guess as long as I can. Once we always joked about it. It's kind of like once someone comes over and takes my job essentially, or once I stop performing, I think is the best way to really categorize or figure that out.
Yeah, but I'm being blunt here. Again, we speak to each other pretty frankly. That's why we've had a good relationship for so long. I just don't see anyone on the horizon. I mean, I'm talking about even in the league. You really haven't, sure, are you as fast as you were when you were 23? Probably not, but you're better than you were when you were 23 as a paintball player. You make really high level decisions in big spots. You play a more timing role. And you can kind of, the one guy of the core, so it's you, Alex, and Yosh. Oliver obviously got a little bit of a guest appearance to win, the finals MVP a couple years ago, but Yosh plays a role where he shoots on the break. He's a massive gunfighter, and then he fills up, but he hasn't really, he's still got it and has had some big points for you guys. Alex also recently, a couple years ago, won an MVP. He's still pretty fast for his role, but Alex still plays kind of a one. You're the position that you're playing. I feel that you can continue to ride this until, like you said, somebody comes to take your spot. But and I've had this conversation, we got Ryan Gray coming on a little bit. I talked to him today, and I've had this conversation with a lot of guys. I mean, your peers still look at you as a lethal elite killer out there. So as far as playing ability is concerned, yeah, man, you have aged like a fine wine out there, and it just is what it is, So I don't really even see anyone Dynasty could pick up to take over that spot. Now, on your team, between you, Archie, guys that kind of play that 2 as that first attacker on the Snake side. I mean, Archie is also still really insanely elite. He's won some MVPs as well recently as well, too. It's just kind of like who's going to be the guy that's going to have it at that level at that weekend. But you've talked about this, how, even for at your level, the reason why Dynasty's been so good is that, you have to fight for playing time. Archie has to fight for playing time. Mm-hmm. The first attacker, a little bit more of an Arturo, Harrison Fry, it was Urena before, but, you guys have different dudes that do that role. But I really don't see that kind of happening unless you have some sort of catastrophic injury. So I think that you will continue to do this until either the fire burns out inside you, to not want to go out there when it's 100 degrees to go to practice. And, obviously you got 3 kids now, you got the new twins, the boys, and you got a daughter, a very precocious, awesome little daughter who is always fun to hang out with. Run circles around my son. But yeah, it's just one of those things, because I've seen a lot of guys recently, we have this conversation about the sport, is that when X-Ball first came around, it was like, oh, it's going to be these young missiles, these, wild little kids that are kind of going to run around with machine guns. And that's not what paintball has evolved to. When you look at, we just were at the WCPPL, there's a lot of grown men and women playing that series. And these are people with regular lives, and they just really love paintball. And it's getting really hard to win those events. And so you look at the regional events, you look at the success of the NXL. I mean, this is kind of one of those things that people are really wanting to do as adults. It's not just a thing to do as kids. And I think, so obviously, again, are you just going to do this until the wheels fall off, until somebody takes your spot? Because you could move into a coaching role. You could move, you have other things going on.
Yeah, that's a good question.
All this stuff.
I don't know. And maybe it's just a little bit of complacency here in my life. And there never really has been a pivot that I've done. It's a little scary to kind of think about that in your mid or early 40s. How long am I going to play? Well, I have kind of put all my eggs in the basket here of paintball. So it's actually really tough to kind of decide on that one. Luckily for me, I don't really get paid very much for Dynasty, so I could take a coaching job anywhere and probably still make a living off of paintball, which is a good way of, I guess that's like somewhat of a relief, for career wise. But no, it's tough to say. Like I think I coach local teams out here with Omega and the Narcos guys, and I enjoy doing that. But obviously, playing paintball with my friends is the reason I started playing paintball to begin with. All of us, really. And that's also funny because maybe that's like one of the big driving and motivating factors, right? There's guys that'll quit maybe earlier because they're over it, because they're not really playing with their friends. Half the league isn't really playing. Well, I wouldn't say half the league, but a lot of people aren't playing with their friends. They're just pretending like the people that they play with are their friends. They're playing because they're getting paid to do it. So you can easily see why people will get burnt out quicker that way. Also, I'm incredibly competitive, right? So that's a really big, you touched on it, driving factor and motivating factor to be on Dynasty, is because like, I don't want to lose. First of all, I want to play, but then at the same time, the conflict there is like, I also want to I want to watch the team win from the sidelines, be like, yeah, we did it. How cool was it for like Oliver, coming into Vegas, or just like being in the pit watching the team win. And even when he came in for World Cup, like he absolutely contributed to the team's success. But like, he was there as like a player and a fan, and like he saw the evolution of like the changing of the guard essentially, and watched the team win from the. That's always been kind of a dream as well for me, as far as how that could go down,
Yeah, it's one of those questions that I kind of have to ask at this point in time in the juncture, just because, like we talked about, I mean, you still are at that level, but now everything does end. I mean, kind of remember at the tail end of my career, even though I was still young, but it was the motivation to have to be rebuild excessive again when I had these other opportunities. Having to drive up to NorCal 15 times in 1 year. I'm like, man, I feel like I'm better served both for my life and for the sport itself, to kind of move into this other role and do that. And it has worked out. But there are these certain junctures in the road where you do have to make a decision. You're not there yet, but at some point in time, that day will come, and it will come before, as our kids get older. It's like, dude, you blink your eye, kid's 4. It's like, how did that happen? So you're going to blink your eye and kind of be in that spot. But also it was kind of funny to, it's like Spica, I said the same thing about Spica when I watched him coach down in Florida. This is a few years ago. And then, we were kind of coaching the same squad, just in different divisions. And I went in to watch the premier squad play at the WCPPL. And dude, I listened to the Spick and Span show on Tuesday, and I didn't watch it live, but I watched it afterwards. So don't give me shit for like not, like you're always like, oh, the dudes are watching the shadows and didn't say anything. I did, because there was a few things where I would have been like, I would have jumped in if I was there live, for sure, because I had a few bones to pick with some of the things that were said. But it was just funny that as you were talking through your coaching of the Narcos, because I was in the pits when some of this stuff was happening, and we were talking about how hot it was and how you guys had certain dudes playing the line, but you needed certain guys to go. Oh, we might have lost some Ryan to there. But it was just is that you're a hardcore coach, and I appreciate that. Is that because I grew up with nothing but hardcore coaches. I'm a hardcore coach too. I even told Oz, I was like, hey man, the dude that you see on the webcast, like, I mean, that's me too. But when I'm coaching, I hate losing. Yeah. And I'm going to be very, 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 very real with everyone that's there. Like, we're there to win. I'm not going to pull any punches. We have to have a vicious amount of honesty when it's dealing with guys. So I asked him, I'm like, hey man, does everyone need to play? What's the situation? Because anytime you're kind of moving into something like that, you kind of want to know with the powers that be, like, okay, well, where do we sit with this? And again, we're bringing Ryan Gray on in a little bit. So going to talk to him a little bit about this too. And he was like, dude, you can literally kick someone out and send them home if you want to, bro. Like, whatever you want to do. And I was like, because, I don't like to lose. And when we're coaching grown people doing grown people things, then there needs to be a certain level of like intensity to it. And it was just, so that point when you were talking about how hot it was and this and that, and you're like talking about your dudes in the pits. Ryan was like this. You were like, your guys are coming in gassed. They had ran out of water in there. And you were like, we don't have time for you to be tired. I need you up next. I can't remember some of the names of the dudes. But you're like, you can't be down. Can you go? Oh, you can't go? You're like shaking your head. You're like, okay, who can go? Can you go? Ben, you're still hurt? How's your knee? Okay. Hey, I need you up, bro. I need you up. Like, I don't give a shit if it's 106 degrees out there. We squandered this lead. Hey, you got shot in the snake. That was absolutely ridiculous. You were just hammering these dudes. And I had a big, huge, like, Joker smile on my face because I'm like, there's the real Ryan Greenspan. Like, there he is. Because it was impressive. I was like, yeah, dude, like, that's how it has to go. So, before we kind of jump in, because I don't have you all day. I know you got the twins and we got to get Ryan in here, but I just wanted to talk to you. Like, what's the methodology or going on in your mind? Because you were pretty ruthless with those dudes, but they've been relatively successful in a short amount of time. I feel like that's what it takes. You have to be that type of guy. Every coach I've ever had that I respected, was that way with me. And I feel like that's kind of the way that it needs to go down.
Yeah. I give players when I'm coaching, and even like when we're talking about it, like Chris and I playing on the side, or Kevin does a good job of this too. It's like you give the guys a pretty long leash, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell them to do something that they are not comfortable with doing, right? But there's a line when someone, it's like, hey, I'm a little tired. It's like we got 6 guys, so I can't have 2 people sit at the same time. So like, I need you, right? And I think that like there's a little bit of empathy that can be drawn from that as well. Like, I'm emotionally involved in this. It's not like, all right, cool. Well, like, whatever, if you don't want to play, like, I'll just figure something out. Like, I care. And I know that the guys can feel that type of energy. And I always tell guys, like, I put you on the field, like, because I believe in you, right? If there's a play that I specifically draw out, or we think that something's going to work, it's because I believe it's going to work. So you got to believe in me, right? Because I believe in you. And dude, the Narcos guys especially have really bought into that concept, and it's like, I think that a lot of coaches out there are, and one of the big things, right, is I know how to play paintball. I think that's one of the biggest things where coaches struggle. And we've had this in the past, it's like, Kevin doesn't shoot any of the lanes. Like, he watches us play, but he takes a lot of the input back from what is going on, and he believes us and he trusts us on the field. And one thing that I've been really criticized for, especially on Dynasty, is for constructive thinking, right? And I think that maybe sometimes it goes a little too far, but there needs to be pushback. There needs to be blowback.
Or constructive criticism. Constructive criticism.
Thinking
is what you're talking about, right?
No, because the criticism thing, I'm not big on that. I'm not big on like, hey, I can do this better, or you're doing it wrong. Like, I don't really think that I say that as much as I think I try to push my concept of the game plan. I'm not like, oh, we say like you're looking the wrong way, or like, hey, you should be looking this way. But it's not like, oh, you suck at gunfighting. Like that's not something that I even tackle. It's the constructive, the critical thinking, is more like challenging each other's game plans and challenging what everybody's ability is on the field, right? Because that's how you polish up the best concept. And a lot of people have problems with that because, like, I'm going to argue until I'm proven wrong that my method is right. Until it doesn't work, or there's a clear-cut reason on why, like, it's got to be somewhat scientific as to like how we break down scenarios. And it's like, I want all the pieces of the puzzle to be as correct as possible before we go out there and throw our shit on the wall. And so that's like the biggest headwind and pushback that I'm kind of criticized for sure, is because I'm like, no, we should do this or change this or tweak this little thing here and there. And I'm not saying that like I'm always right, but that's also kind of like helps when I'm coaching the divisional side of things and the premier side of things, is I'll ask the guys like, hey, what did you see here? Why didn't you do it this way? What was the difference here? Can you change this? How did you die from that? And then we're constantly evolving and tweaking until we get it as perfect as possible. And like you pointed out the Narcos guys, and I'll point that out again. Like they've never won an event. They didn't win a single event in D3, barely making it out. And they're like, hey, we want to go Premier. I was like, which is semi-pro essentially. I'm like, all right, well, it's going to take a lot of work. And we're sitting in second place in the WCPPL, which is the second biggest league in the US. So they're doing great. They're buying into the system. And then, on Dynasty, like, our success comes from everybody's minds collectively going in and nitpicking every single detail of every single game plan and understanding as much of the if this then that's as possible.
Yeah.
And that's hugely important.
Well, I couldn't agree more, bro. I mean, honestly, it's one of those situations where you have to be willing to engage in you could call it an argument or you could call it a constructive conversation. But if you can't bring your intellect and your knowledge to bear in a situation and have a conversation about what we're all trying to achieve, whether that's how to play this bunker or a play, the concept of paintball itself, like if you can't defend your position, well, then maybe your position's not correct. I mean, it's like there's an example from regular sports, and it's interesting that this is an example because baseball's been around for 140 years as a profession. Like there's been people playing professional baseball for like 130, 140 years. And there's he won a Cy Young award. His name's Trevor Bauer. He got run out of the league with some false allegations, but he's been playing in the Mexican league. And I advise anyone to go watch this because it's great for the mental element of being in a gunfight. Is the same thing as a pitcher trying to deal, because I was a pitcher when I played baseball back in the day. And the mental battle that goes on between a pitcher and a batter, or a batter and a pitcher, is very much like you in a gunfight with somebody. You're trying to trick them. You're trying to be deceptive. You're trying. Specific elements exist within the framework of a gunfight. And if you are not understanding that that's what it is, then you are not going ever to be elite, because that's what it takes. And so he's done these vlogs where, dude has made millions of dollars playing baseball over the years. So he just has this guy following around, and he's in the Mexican league now. And he just struck out 19 guys and set a record. It didn't even go the whole 9 innings. But he's literally talking you through every single pitch he throws, why he's throwing that pitch. And I mean, it takes an hour. So like, it is a little bit of an ask to watch these videos. I had no idea this was happening until recently. And I started watching this and I was like, oh my God, I have never seen anything in sports that's this thorough. You have a Cy Young Award winner telling you how to throw the pitch, why he's throwing the pitch, what the batter does, and literally walking you through the chess match of that specific situation. And there was a moment where he was talking to, so all the guys in the Mexican league that are American dudes are guys that didn't make it in the Major League, in Major League Baseball in the bigs for whatever reason. And so he's having this conversation with this one dude. I'm willing to burn this time instead of talking about the brackets, which we need to get to before we bring Ryan Gray in here, because I just think this is so important. If you're an up-and-coming or a paintball player or a jiu-jitsu guy or whatever, a baseball player, it doesn't matter. Like if you're talking to a coach and he can't explain to you using logic why you should be doing a specific thing, then that's a bad coach or they have bad information. Like that's just the truth. So when you're sitting there and you're saying, hey, I'm trying to fight for my game plan. And I know like you and Marcel have always butted heads about game plans. Obviously, one of the secret things that, one of the secrets of Dynasty success is their willingness to engage in the hard conversations. I always used to joke, I'd pay $10 to get entry to watch you guys argue at practice for 6 hours, because it was hilarious. It was like you, Oliver, Alex, and then Yosh would come in and kind of be the voice of reason. Hey, okay, enough, Ryan, enough, Oliver. But it was so entertaining when we would practice against you guys, because I'd be, like as I'm going back to Phil Potts, I'm like, I'm going to sit here for 45 seconds and watch, Alex and Oliver yell at each other. Because I would also kind of learn what you guys were thinking about the field in the, that spasm of anger, because no, we need to do it this way, or we need to do it that way. So Trevor Bauer was talking about how when he came into baseball and some of these old school pitchers, and like this is in Moneyball, in that Brad Pitt movie, it's the same sort of thing. You have this old school knowledge that does not hold up to a new school analytics. oh yeah, you need to throw your first fastball like low and away. And he'd be like, okay, okay, why would I do that? He's like, because then there's nothing I can play off that pitch. I'm trying to create tunnels here. A tunnel meaning, okay, if I throw a rising fastball or a fastball that stays up and outside, then I can throw a slider off of that in that same tunnel, and it's gonna curve the opposite way. And I'm tricking. You're just trying to trick people constantly, And so he was asking him like, okay, well, what do I do with this situation? And the guy was like, well, this is just how it's done. Like, this is how it's done is not an answer that you should ever give to anybody. You have to explain to people, especially people you're trying to teach, why you're doing it a certain way. And so and then Trevor Bauer is going to make a 10 out of 10 pitching coach at one point in time. But, but he was, and so literally, so then he was to be like a spiteful asshole when he was younger. And they're like, we want to see nothing but, 60% fastballs. So he would just go out and throw, 70% breaking balls on general principle and strike out 13 dudes. And then the pitching coach would be like, well, what am I supposed to tell the front office? And he would be like, tell the front office I punched out 13 dudes in 6 innings. Like, is this working or is it not working? Because at the end of the day, that's the conversation. Like, that's the ultimate litmus test is this working or is it not working? And so Dynasty's willingness with you, Marcelo, Oliver, Al, whatever it is, like over the years, all these different guys that have been on the team, like the willingness to engage in those hard conversations to figure out what is and is not working is of fundamental importance. And it's not just paintball. So before we kind of head into the brackets and I let you go, because I mean, if I got to talk to you for hours about this, and maybe we should jump on it and talk about this more at some point in time, but I got to get your thoughts on that because that's you, because like we talked about this off camera the other day where people were like, oh, some people think I'm an asshole. I'm like, dude, you actually really aren't. You are a really nice guy as like a friend of yours and an ex-roommate. You're just a very smart person that doesn't suffer fools. And you can be a bit like a little sarcastic, and you can be if you feel like somebody's not matching you wit to wit, like, yeah, that I could see how somebody could be like, oh, Ryan's an asshole. But in reality, you're just you're throwing your thing out to somebody. And if they can't match you, then you're like, okay, well, this isn't a real serious conversation here. And I need to get to serious conversations because we have things to do,
Yeah, I guess a little more, efficiency there is there's like a lot of times I'm like, maybe the bullshit isn't really necessary. Fluff. I hate fluff. No, it's interesting. Something you said on there, which with is it working or is it not, like, there's a lot of improvising that needs to go down in paintball, especially, right? Like there's plan A, you got to have a plan B. And then after that, it's like, if shit's going down, what is the game plan after that? A lot of people need to be able to improvise under pressure. And you'll see players that do so really well, the calm ones in there, the ones that kind of like are okay with experimenting. It's like, I always say like, hey, it's like, a lot of stuff you need to do on the field, you got to do it with confidence, right? Even if it's a mistake. Think about, like, especially in practice, like you're out there just testing the electric fence for finding weaknesses. But if you don't have the confidence to make mistakes, or if your coach holds you too accountable for those mistakes and practices, and you don't have a good explanation as to why you did something or how it's going to work, and you're not receptive to like the back and forth with the coach, then you're not really going to get anywhere. But if you just kind of only do what a coach says, it's a good thing. But like the guys that are like Oliver Lang is a great example. He'll be like, all right, go up here and shoot this way, and hold this lane. Next thing you know, he goes down the middle of the field and bunkers 3 or 4 guys. You're like, okay, well, shit, you weren't supposed to do that, but tight. It worked out. Right. And so like that's that whole artist and architect conversation that we've had before on the show. And I think a lot of people understand that, like, you need to have the ability to be an artist, but I think you also need to have the ability to understand the bones and the meat of the actual game plan and the concept behind it. So that way you can have a more educated plan B and plan C. And then constantly calculating the probabilities and the odds on both sides of the field in real time as quickly as possible to understand better what the plan B is going to be, or how you're going to execute the next step in the next phase. But most certainly you need to be challenging to the coach. I know a lot of people, and I've had this kind of discussion with a lot of players, is like, on the divisional side, especially, like a lot of the players that are watching this right now, and I don't want to knock your coaches, but a lot of times, unless you have a pro high level coach who's with you, the coach generally hasn't really achieved much more than where you're at this current point in your time in time. And a lot of times is they just kind of like played a higher division than you. And so you put a lot of trust in that coach in that position. So like, it's okay to be challenging, but you have to be confident about it, because if you're, if you make a mistake and you're like, oh crap, like I didn't mean to do that. Oops, then you're going to be more deterred to do something big and bold later on. So you need to be able to be confident with mistakes, just like you are confident in everything else, especially in practice. And maybe you need to have a conversation with your coach about it specifically, because I don't want to get someone cut prior. But like, hey, I'm going to try some things. I never fault my guys for making a move, especially in these blind layout events. But like, you should never be faulted for trying something and making a move. But if you get shot out of your spot, it's like, well, how'd you die? Oh, I was gunfighting. Well, dude, stop doing that. Like, you can't die. But if you put a guy in, made a big move, and you were like trying to like break the game open, or we can work with that. Say, hey, look, like what do you need to check off next time, or however it is. So like, I'm just confident in making mistakes, because a lot of times, again, the probabilities, which is why Oliver is so damn good, or one of the many reasons, was because he's like, I'm going to make this move. And for every 10 times that he made a move, it probably only worked less than 50%. But that's why he's got 4 other guys on the team to help cover or clear everything up, because those other 5 times or 4 times that he didn't make a mistake, he's taking 3 or 4 guys off the field and effortlessly winning games for us. So again, he's constantly okay with testing the electric fence there to find the weakness in everybody's game plans. So I that's like a big piece of advice. And that's why I think Dynasty's pretty good. Like, Archie's okay with making those moves, right? I'm okay with making those moves until they don't. And the guys are going to constantly and consistently be probing and prodding. And that's why the Russians are so good right now. Like, they're sending it till they can't. And, unless someone's prepared to like set up a better fence, better defenses, but then you're on your heels, and that's not where you want to be. You can't win on your heels.
No, Legion's done an amazing job of pushing the issue with all these layouts. And I mean, they've been very consistent, obviously 2 wins in a row, a 3rd place, and they're doing it with a light line, just the starting 5, essentially. A second they come off that starting 5, you go from the top, dudes that are in the top 20 in the league.
They're one. I was saying to J-Rab, they're one bad meal away from a complete catastrophe at last place.
Well, if you go back, I mean, so we're working on it. I'm working on a road to the finals right now here for Go Sports, and I just finished up going back into the studio to finish the 60-minute TV show. So it's kind of been a lot of work over here, but it's kind of watching it. It's very impressive the way they're playing the chess match, and then they're just outplaying guys at offense. Like, that's what they're doing. I mean, they're just pushing the issue, and their starting 5 is. I mean, you got kind of we talk about J-Rab and Archie doing this a similar thing. You do this sometimes too. All the masters do this, but they will stand up out of a spot until you make them flinch, because they're looking at the incoming streams. They're reading those streams like Neo and the Matrix, and when you do put one close to them, they'll dodge it. They're not always going to dodge that, but it does give them a huge advantage if you allow them to have that, that room to work, to put things together. And, with Karslev on the D side, and then Sergey and Kirill and how lethal they've been with those off the break shots, and then Malloy and J-Rab and the finishing, it's been insane. So I do want to get your thoughts on your bracket before I let you go. But yeah, I mean, give me some thoughts on Legion and how they're pushing the issue on the offense. I mean, I feel that a lot of other teams are maybe getting a little bit too cute with strategy these days, whereas Legion's like, no, we're taking the ground. Like, okay, what are the important bunkers? We're going to push it. If you shoot a couple of us, we don't care, because we're going to get into those spots. And once we get into those spots, you're going to have a really hard time, because, if you get Karslev up far on the D side, you get Malloy far up on the snake side, and Kirill somewhere in the middle. And then J-Rab, if J-Rab and Sergey stay alive, if just one of them stays alive, even if they go down 5-4, a la the first point, which was, in that wind, with the wind tunnel that was that field. But they're just kind of beating the brakes off a lot of teams. If you look at their plus minus at the past two events, it's insane, dude. I mean, like the past two events for Legion, at the last event was a plus 29, and the one before that was a plus 19. They're beating the shit out of everybody. Like there's a couple games that are close here and there, and hats off to the teams that are keeping it close against Legion the past two events. But it kind of reminds me, Dynasty was a plus 14 at your guys' first event. And you guys have had some plus 20s in some of the wins you've had before. But Legion is utilizing offense with that light line, and they are making people pay by just running to these crucial spots and playing just lights out from those positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely playing some high-level paintball right now. And the amount of time and effort they're putting on the field prior in preparation is also next level. Like we've always kind of talked about this, and it's like, I actually, what I don't understand is why the other big budget teams aren't putting more effort in like that. It just seems like if Dynasty had a budget that was even like half one of those top 3 team budgets, we would be unstoppable, because like we just can't afford to continue. We just can't afford to play more paintball. And that's kind of where it is. And that's actually the huge drop between the next bottom tier 10 teams. And that's why I think Fit is going to be much, much, much better as the more experience they get. We got to play them at the next one too. But they just have so much time, and they're on the field all the time, and they're just going to get better and better and exponentially better at that. And so that's going to be a big one for them. And it's like the more field time, and the Russians are there for 1 month on the field doing drills 5 days a week. It's like you can't really compete with that. You can't. And it finally shows.
Yeah, no. So before I let you know, I agree with you. But this is kind of the pendulum swinging as things go. When we formed Excessive to beat you guys back when you guys were on your big runs, and honestly, you guys, beat us way more than we beat you. So you guys did get the best of us. But that was the Everest. You guys were the Everest. Because we. With the Ironman, we were doing really well before, and we were contending with these certain teams, the Images, the Avalanches, the Aftershocks, and then you guys started beating everybody up, and then we realized, okay, well, if we're going to be beating them, we have to work harder. And I knew you guys, and you guys were playing a lot of paintball, but you guys weren't in the gym. You guys weren't playing, tons of days a week. So we did that, and then we did beat you guys a little bit. Again, you guys definitely beat us way more than we beat you guys, but at least we got back in there. And then now Legion's coming out and doing that. So I'm just kind of wondering, as the pendulum swings back and forth, if this is going to continue for this year. And this is kind of leading into the bracket conversation, because you guys do have Shock in your bracket now. Shock has had a pretty good run this year in the sense that, they put their team together 15th at the first one, but then a 4th and a 2nd. So they're definitely trending the right way. And then you have PB Fit, who plays as much paintball as anybody does because they have their own field. Infamous, who's been very hit or miss this year. I do love that line. I'm going to continue to stay on this. I'm going to die on this hill. I really like the line, even losing Nate Schrader, who just got picked up by Uprising, which I think is a huge pickup for Uprising. I can't wait to see what Nate does for Uprising, because I've been a huge fan of Uprising since I was drinking beers with them at a bar at the end on a Sunday night in Paris one year, or in Chantilly after they had won. And I just really like those guys. Yeah. So I've always I really wanted them to do well. They've just been very much hit or miss. I think Nate's good for them. And then you have the ML King. So before I let you go and bring Ryan Gray, Coach AZ Diesel in here, what do you think about this bracket? So do you think a wild card is going to come out of this? And then do you think so my two big questions are wild card, yes or no? Other 4 teams, quick thoughts. And then do you think Shock's going to continue their upward climb and contend to be that, team with you that moves on to Sunday and then see what happens after that? Or do you think they're going to have, some work to do still? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, Matty, has work to do, and I think that us and Shock are probably going to be the two that move on from this division, with Fit possibly being the team that kind of shakes things up. I mean, Infamous, I always consider them one of our biggest threats, really. I mean, they're so good. They just had, like you said, some inconsistency on their lines. Losing Thomas hurt them, losing Harrison hurt them. So obviously that's a benefit to us. Shock has been doing such a good job. Todd's been doing great with that team as far as just kind of getting them prepped and ready. And Todd has like the winning mentality too, and that just obviously just permeates throughout the entire line. And just to touch on the Russians, yeah, they're definitely stoppable. If offense is their only weapon, really, I mean, their individual skills are their main weapon, and how sharp they are. But they're coming, so that's like, if the enemy is going to be attacking at all fronts, that's an advantage. You've got what they're going to do. You've got the concepts and the idea. It's just, can we stop them? And can somebody stop them? And I think that we are very well suited to be able to do something like that. So I believe that Dynasty obviously has it in our ability and our toolbox to be able to stop anybody, really. But yeah, it's just how much, relentless banging on the door, on the gates can we handle? Because that's how Shock beat us also, in the times that we've played them, it's just that relentless attack, from everywhere. Also, not to mention, like, A-Rod's just playing such high level paintball as well, that certainly helps them tremendously. So yeah, I mean, we're prepped. I think we're going to do very well. Everybody's very hungry. We're excited to go see each other and play. So yeah, I'm excited for Chicago.
Yeah, me too. Going down September 13th through the 15th. Ryan Greenspan, thank you so much. Check out the Spick and Span show. When is it again, Ryan? I think it's like Tuesdays at 4, right? Is it Tuesdays at 4?
Tuesdays, every Tuesday, 4 p.m., internet weather permitting. It's the #1 rated live paintball show on YouTube at 4 p.m. And it's great because pretty much every other online paintball show decided to take the Tuesday slot, just like we did. So we found the best day. Everybody's emulating us. It's very it's very nice to see. I love that everybody tries to take the same time slot as us, but we're the original 4 p.m. Tuesdays every single week. Clockwork, baby.
Yeah, and if you need Ryan Greenspan to teach you a clinic or coach your team, hit him up on Instagram or his social media. But Ryan, dude, again, you're the GOAT, brother. I've just really love watching you your whole career, and it's been awesome to see. Anything you want to say before we bring Ryan Gray in?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Matty. I got to thank, but my daughter's already here because I got to go take her surfing right now. But speaking of staying in shape, can you not? Okay. So we're getting shorter. Yeah, like you said, Matty, one of the things that I've been doing quite a bit lately, which is absolutely really helpful for a lot of teams, is doing online training. So we've been doing a lot of field breakdown stuff, and I think that's been really beneficial for a lot of teams. So yeah, if you guys need anything, hit me up. I mean, really, honestly, everything. I appreciate everybody's support. Whether you're just a fan of paintball, that's really important. So thank you guys for creating the content. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Hey man, best of luck at the next one. So we're gonna bid adieu to Ryan Greenspan. I'm gonna bring in Ryan Gray. I mean, interested to see for this conversation as well. Yeah, man. I mean, Greenspan and Dynasty. Well, hey Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Check out the Coaches Show. Love what you guys have been doing on the Coaches Show. I got on the show for the first time the other day. It's you and Mike Bianca. And you and Mike Bianca, when I jump on the phone with you guys, I can't get off the phone for at least, there's no way we're having less than a 40 minute long conversation, just because there's so many things to talk about. We're going to talk about like books. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about paintball. We're going to talk about our family. You guys are high level IQ guys. So it's a huge resource for the game. The Coaches Show is huge. When are you guys kind of typically going live with that? Is it a set time, or is it a little bit more liquid? Obviously, with like the Spick and Span show, it's Tuesdays at 4. But when is the Coaches Show going live? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, we got a bit of an audio issue here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, you were muted because you're a professional. You're a professional, so you were on the Zoom meeting and you were muted. It's all good, brother. So yeah, same question though.
Right.
Like, so yeah.
Yeah, so we go live at 7 p.m. Central Time, which is 5 p.m. West. So we're an hour. We started an hour after Spick and Span. Ryan's correct. They were the first ones to do it on Tuesday, but that's like if you're traveling playing paintball, Tuesday's the day, right? Like because you're coming home from an event, nobody wants to do anything on Monday, and a lot of times we're leaving on Wednesday. So.
Hey, totally understandable. So there's a couple things that I really wanted to talk to you about, and like I said, anytime I jump on a phone call with Ryan, we're having really high level conversations, and wanted to bring some of that in here. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk to you about is that, you're in a very unique position, and you've been in this position with different teams over the years, and you've coached high level teams before. And last year, you were with Notorious and kind of helped them, get to a spot. I mean, so I want to ask this question. Did you think realistically that Notorious had any chance of getting into the pro division when you were coaching them? I'm sure in your heart of hearts, you're like, oh yeah, we'll get there. But, you coached Notorious, and then now you're coaching Diesel. While you were coaching Notorious, did you think them being a pro team was a legit possibility, or was it kind of like a moonshot? What do you think?
No, I knew we could. We, I first started coaching that team in 2021. That was kind of the deal. I told them that if they would commit to me for 3 years, I would commit to them for 3 years, wouldn't leave if the group would stay together. If they did the things I asked them to do, I guaranteed them I would make them a pro team. They're the third team that I've taken pro, over the last 25 years. And so I understood the recipe, right? Like I understand the work that it takes, and kind of the combination of guys that you have to have. And, Michael Kovar was a big part of that, obviously, in the semi-pro year. And, you always got to have one or two guys who have tasted, not just played at the pro level, but have played championship paintball at the pro level, and understand kind of what that looks like, what it feels like. So yeah, I thought for sure we would turn pro. Did I think it would take longer than one season in semi-pro? Yes.
Let me ask you this question. So what is the recipe then? Because there's so many people out there that, there's thousands and thousands of people that play divisional paintball. I feel that in their heart of hearts, they would love to obviously tier up into whatever level their tenacity, their skill, and their hearts will allow them to do. But it's incredibly difficult, and it gets more difficult as you do climb up that mountain. But what's the recipe? You said, hey, there's a recipe. What is that recipe? And you can go as much detail as you want on this, or you can keep it super specific with bullet points. But I feel like people are probably asking right now, okay, Ryan, what's the recipe? Dude, give us the recipe with their notepads out. Like we're going to try to follow this.
Yeah. So the recipe is you've got to have a really strong leader, right? Whether or not, and again, I talk about this a lot, even on the show. Usually that's not your best player, right? A lot of times the leader is the guy who shows up first, he leaves last. He's always encouraging everyone, always has his chin up, eyes up, shoulders back, kind of lives in a pretty disciplined way, right? It's not just about their paintball. It's also kind of the way they live their lives. And then you've got to have a decent coach, right? Somebody who's taken some a team, kind of through the ranks, if you can find one. And then a lot of belief, right, in the system, understanding the guys believing in the system. SK says this all the time, and I agree with it. Even if you're wrong, sell it 100%, right? And everybody buy into the wrong, because if 100% of people are bought into the wrong, it's going to go way better than 50% bought into the right. If that makes sense. But and then you also have to have a budget that's big enough for you to play a lot of paintball, for you to shoot a lot of paint, run a lot of drills. We did a ton of off the break stuff, which is not just foundational, but in semi-pro, as you get through the ranks, Division II, semi-pro, pro, the better you can be in those first 15 seconds, and especially in today's brand of layouts and paintball, the better you're going to be.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of one of those situations where, again, thousands of divisional paintball players, there's a couple hundred pros. We have 20 pro teams, about 10 dudes on a roster, talking about 200 guys. But to get there individually is one thing. To get there as a team is a totally different, more difficult trial to go through. And Notorious's run was pretty historic. And so I have to tip my hat and respect to you on that, and what you've done with some of these other teams over the years. So now you're dealing with AC Diesel, which is a totally different situation than Notorious in a lot of ways. So I guess I got to ask you first, 20th at the beginning of the year after a frustrating last season, which you did not have a part of. And then you come in this season and then it goes 20th, 9th, 13th. Where currently is the headspace for Diesel? Because that's a well-funded team with a bunch of stars on the squad and a bunch of talent. And sitting at 16th overall is not where the power structure of that team wants to be. That's a team that wants to win paintball tournaments, and not just win a lot and be one of the best teams ever. It also is interesting because if we're looking at, what's possible, there are multiple teams in the past 5 years, because, I just finished doing the hour-long version of the TV show, and one of the, which requires a lot of work. And one of the pieces of writing that I kind of had to do to at least of research, because one of the producers put in on like a dummy line, like a scratch track, was if Legion could win 2 tournaments in a row, that hasn't been done since 2000 and such, question mark, right? That's actually been done by like a bunch of different teams in the past 5 years. Dynasty's won 2 events in a row. X Factor's won 2 events in a row. Legion just did it. Damage has done it. Impact has done it. So teams go on runs. And so I had to kind of take that bracket of knowledge out and be able to describe it in a different way. But when you do get on the same page, and look at Legion. Legion went 5 years without winning a tournament, and they found the missing puzzle piece for him, which was Justin Rabikoff, which you coach, or which you have some experience with on AC Diesel. And, it's just kind of one of those things where, I mean, again, there's lots of different ways we could go with this, but the question to you is, where is Diesel right now in their heads with the frustration that has happened with the placements and not, fighting forward on Sunday, going deep on Sundays? And so I'll start with there. Like, where right now, like, how is the vibe on the squad?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, because I think the vibe might be a little bit different depending on who you ask. Where I think we are right now, and again, this is we just finished my 3rd event with this group, right? Still trying to kind of figure out and put my finger on some of the problems. I think the biggest issue we have right now, and then I'll answer your question, is that the frustrations of the underperformance have become overwhelming. And so when we have practices where we do things really well, we look really good, the communication is great, the tempo is good, and then we get to the event, it looks different. So I think right now, kind of everybody's mentality is, let's throw the kitchen sink at it. Let's do a lot of things different. So we are. We have a workout this coming weekend with Paintball Fit and Austin Notorious, and we're gonna kind of show a bunch of new looks, moving guys around a little bit. We're gonna certainly change our tempo. The last event we lost We went 1-3, all 1-point games, and with a slow tempo, right, which is not conducive to success on the way these layouts are. So we've got to increase our tempo a little bit, right? We've allowed in those 3 losses and even in the 1 win, when you play tight games with low scoring points, you end up allowing 1 penalty to be a big deal. And that happened to us, right? We had a few penalties at the wrong times. It's tough on the referees because again, with the layouts the way they are now, the tempo going up, they've got to make really fast calls in a very short amount of time because the bunkers are also really close, right? So, a guy diving through a space, getting shot, going into the next spot, them trying to figure out, were they trying to take it off? Did they know they were hit? Were they just going to the next space to check it? There's a lot of things that are occurring in that split second, right, as that occurs. So the tempo has to come up a little bit. We've got to play a little faster. They did this all year last year, and I kind of stuck with it for the first couple of events this year. We just got to get away from it. The slow, methodical, controlled style of play, just unfortunately on these layouts, is not being congratulated. The teams that are, finding success and value are the ones that are playing high tempo.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, especially when I look at your roster, and I kind of wanted to go through your roster a little bit here, because this is one of those situations where, okay, so when you look at the top teams and the money that you have to get guys, so you have, Legion, Heat, they pay guys. X Factor does it. They do it covertly, but they pay guys. Dynasty, yeah. They can get you some money. They can get you this or that, but like Dynasty they're not really in the race, in the running for, off-season craziness, even though they always find a way to get talent. Shock. We'll see, it does look like Todd Adamson's down to throw down. But obviously he put his team together. Some of those guys are getting paid. Impact definitely obviously pays guys. Hurricanes sitting at 7th. I'm just going through the top teams here and letting people know what's up without giving away too many details here. Hurricanes, they are not a team that has the funding to pay guys. It's been incredibly impressive to see what they've been able to do with what Bianca's been working with, but also 2 rough events, 13th and 12th. They haven't made a Sunday since that second place finish. Damage absolutely was down to get down in the offseason and pay guys. And they've won some events 2 in a row, not too long ago. Revo pays guys. We'll see what Magic Mike's down to do. They made 2 Sundays. They're on the precipice. PB Fit, Aftermath. And then we get to Infamous also down to pay guys. Ironman, you're probably going to get some guns. So now we're down to 14th, right? So, but also then we go with styles. So Legion has become a force because of how relentless they are on the offense. And this is why I wanted to talk to your roster here, is because your roster has a ton of offense, like a ton. I mean, When I look at your guys and what I've seen them do, I mean, even some of these guys that are still not household names, but I mean, we can start with Mouse, so let me ask you this question about Alex Goldman. To keep him on the team has been, it's been a blessing for AC Diesel. But also he's widely known as the most aggressive and best snake player ever to play the game. And he's been one of the highest paid guys, if not the highest paid guy, depending on how you want to count it, for a while. And so, I kind of want to just go through a couple of these names here and, cause some people, I just want to get your thoughts on it since you are the mastermind behind, the chaos here. Because some people are like, oh, well, Alex Goldman, they need to play him as the one all the time. And we've said this sometimes in the show because when he does get up there, he crushes people. But, I got to ask you, what do you think is the case there? Obviously he's not 25 anymore, but he does do damage when he's up there. But also you don't want to just risk him all the time. I figured we might as well just go to the source and get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. And, the reality is I'd love it if Mouse could run to the snake every single point. But the reality is he's a 35-year-old guy. He's played at a high level for a long time. He's abused the shit out of his body, slamming it into the ground over and over and over again. Could he probably go every time? Sure, he probably could. Would he be as sharp in game 5 or 6 on Sunday as he was in the first one if I send him every time? I don't think so. So Mouse, number one, with him, it's been really my goal this year to try to pull Mouse back a little bit and develop him more into that second guy in, which is really where I think he is now, right? So if you look at like Fuzzy, Matt Jackson and some of the guys out there now that are amazing twos, Tyler Harmon, they were first ones in the snake, right? Being able to go in second and clean things up is really almost as important as the first guy that goes in. So I've really tried to have Mouse develop a little more in that 2 role this year. And then my goal, of course, is to, find somebody in this off season who can be the one every time. Right. I've still got BJ Henningberg, who, gets in. I'm going to probably stand him up and move him around a little bit. I've got Clint Johnson who can go in and be the one, but Clint's played so well in the middle of the field. I don't want to pull him out of there. So I've got a weird kind of conundrum. So Mouse, again, as much as I'd love to put him in every time, I can't. Right. And that's would be irresponsible long term. If I want to keep Mouse around, I need to develop him in a different way. And so I've kind of pulled him back this year, understanding that that's, maybe going to be a little bit painful in the short term, but long-term pay dividends.
No, I couldn't disagree with that. Let's talk about Clint Johnson. I feel like Clint has been a giant highlight reel, literally, for you guys this year. And he hasn't been able to make all the events past couple seasons, but Jesus, man, when Clint is in there and he's on, he is like a human highlight reel. I mean, he won the money for move of the tournament from Pate Smith Law. He's just been a bit of a wild card wrecking ball for you guys that if I was coaching against you, and I also, again, have to tip my hat in respect to these coaches. I feel like when you're armchair quarterbacking this, when you're watching it, it's so difficult when it's happening in real time and you have that very small amount of time to figure out, okay, well, because you can't see everything from what's happening in the pits. It's very difficult to figure out exactly, okay, well, how did that guy just do? Because you also need to see what your opponents are doing, because you need to be coaching. It's not just what you're doing, it's what they're doing, because you're, chess matching against and game planning against what they just ran. And then you're getting input from certain people. You have to hope that input is correct. And then you're getting input from your guys that are coming off. They may not always be telling you the God's honest truth, whether they believe that or not. And so you're dealing with all these variables, and then you have to make this very important decision as to who to send out, where to send them, when to concede points, all these different things that go on into the coaching situation. But one of the bright shining lights for you guys has been Clint Johnson. I mean, Clint Johnson has just been playing some of the best paintball I've ever seen him play. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen out of Clint this year.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know if you know this or not, but like I brought Clint up. Like I picked him up on Texas Storm when he was like 17 years old, maybe. And he was not good. He was not good. And he just developed really, really fast. So kind of being able to watch his career, and I talked to him on Monday, and that's one of the things I told him is, you are playing better than I've ever seen you play. You're more creative. You're more confident. There's been one of the moves that he had in that Texas tournament was a design play for him to jump the beam over the snake and go bunker the guy in the second. We had done that at practice a few times. Now the run through in the middle of the field where he falls down and then stands up and shoots everybody, that was just that just happened, right? So, but yeah, he's playing with a ton of confidence, and the kind of the shining light in that with Clint is Clint's already a really positive person. He's a great teammate. He's a ball of energy, right? He's a little bit like Tyler Harmon in that aspect, with the exception of he doesn't have the eyes. Tyler Harmon has the eyes that are just so sharp. Clint is more like he's just really fiery. He's jumping around. He's just a ball of energy. And so when Clint is playing at that kind of level, it does create this real synergistic energy that spreads around the pit. Now it'd be great, obviously, if others would step up and kind of follow his lead. But Clint has been just a stud this year. I mean, he's the best player on the team right now for sure.
Yeah, he's, as we always say, you need threats and vets, and you guys have both of those. And that's why we've just been expecting that, deep run on a Sunday. And let me ask you this question. Do you think that how much turnover do you think that you're going to see in the roster if you guys don't have a deep run on Sunday? I have to ask this question just because that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. So we got 2 more events to go, and it's been, considering the roster and how good these guys are, and we haven't seen a deep run on Sunday yet. We've seen some Sunday appearances, not as many as you guys would like, but if we don't see a deep run on Sunday, because I feel like if we see a deep run on Sunday, okay, things are working. If you guys can get to the finals or make a really hell of a show of it in the semis, lose by 1, maybe, whatever it ends up happening in these last 2 events, I could see an argument being made from the powers that be in the AC Diesel power structure to not make too many adjustments in the off season. But if we don't see that, if we see another missed opportunity and don't make a Sunday and then make a Sunday losing the wild card or losing in a quarterfinal match, do you imagine much turnover in the off season?
It's a great question. I've had it several times. I've had people kind of ask me very, very similar. The reality is I don't think we have the wrong guys. I think we have a little bit of a culture problem right now. Not a little bit. We have a culture problem. We need guys to understand the work ethic and get back to, understanding that nothing that we do as a group matters if you don't do the individual work away from the group. When you have teams like the Russian Legion doing what they're doing, playing 5 times a week, obviously that's an anomaly. We can't match that, right? Our guys are kind of spread out. We can't do that. So they have to hold themselves accountable and be responsible to the individual work away from us. And then that way, when we get together as a group, we're not having to paintball really is an individual sport played as a group. It's an individual sport played as a group. So if your bottom player is playing at a 4, your team is more going to play at a 4. And when I talk about your bottom player, I'm talking about your bottom of your starting 5, right? If they're playing like a 4, really, you're going to play more like a 4. And that's just the way it works. If individually the guys aren't doing what they need to do, we're going to have problems. So the offseason may not look as chaotic from a roster perspective as it will from a work perspective. Like we're going to do a lot more in the offseason. Like I'm going to create some workouts every 2 weeks where I'm going to have different groups of guys coming in. A lot of them don't know this yet. So that may create some roster turnover on its own, when I tell them what we're doing in the offseason. But the reality is they need to get into a habit and a consistent habit of being at a paintball field at least twice a month, minimum twice a month. And then if they can get to a field at least once during the week to run 2 hours of individual drills, they've got to do it. And that's going to be an expectation going into next season. As far as the rest of the season, that's going to kind of start now. Like we're, at practice this weekend, that's one of the conversations we're going to have is if you want to be here, this is what it takes right now. If we get through World Cup and there's guys who, have not picked up this tool kit that I'm going to lay at their feet, that may create the problem or solution depending on how you look at it on its own, right? But that's going to be an expectation. They've got to play more paintball so that when we get together, we're not having to deal with route running things, they're all really good with their guns. They're really good with their guns, but it's like the physical things with a paintball gun, putting yourself in awkward positions, a lot more route running stuff, that's where that creativity comes from. When you're consistently looking at a field or even a 3 or 5 bunker set area that you're going to or through, finding all those different pathways to go through it, we have to deal a lot with that at practice, and we shouldn't. Guys should be doing that kind of stuff on their own. When the layout comes out and they have a field close to them, go to the field, look at those pathways.
Let's talk about some of these other roster members here. Let's talk about your D side. So, I mean, I've been big on Mark Baginski since I saw him in the Ultimate Shootout during COVID. It was kind of the first time I talked to Mark, and I had driven out to Texas because planes weren't flying at the time, and we did and my mom had cancer, so I had to kind of try to take it as safe as I could. And I got out there, and I'm sitting up, and we're watching the first kind of things go down, and there was this skinny white kid up there, and he was very nice and kind of sarcastic and really smart, and I was like, oh, I like this kid, this guy seems pretty cool. And then come to find out, that's Mark Baginski. And then he went out there and ended up winning an Ultimate Shootout, and I was like, wow, he's and then I talked to Greg Pauly about him, and so then I became a Mark Baginski fan after that. I was like, okay, this guy's witty, he's smart, he's sarcastic, he's really good at paintball. And this is kind of when AC Diesel was, this is 2020, so this is before kind of the incarnation of it currently. But ever since then, I saw his promise. And then you got Jesse Stevens, and Jesse Stevens is a beast. I've watched every single point of Jesse Stevens' career. I've talked him through some big moments and some big situations and some player, some team changes, and I love Jesse, and so you got some firepower is kind of my point, as we were going through this roster. But what do you think is needed to execute over there? Because I feel that we have had not the execution needed, obviously, with the placings you guys have had with the attack on the D side, and so when I kind of look at who you have and what I've seen him do and what I know is possible and what I've then seen actually executed in real time, against the, in the prelims and these limited events on Sunday, it's just not enough, So what do you think, diagnose that and talk me through your thoughts on Baginski and Stevens and whoever else you would want to put on that D side.
Yeah, it's interesting. Those, both of those guys play very different styles. Jesse really wants to get in your face quickly, and he's a little more ballistic. I love Jesse. I want to preface what I'm about to say with that. He's a stud. He works his ass off, but Jesse has a tendency to pick bad gunfights, and so he'll make it really far, and then immediately wrap on something that maybe he shouldn't have, or he looked inside and he shouldn't have. He should have been wrapping at that point. And either lose a bad gunfight or just make an unfortunate decision. Baginski is much more methodical. He wants to start in a spot where he can sort of assess the situation and then go get involved in the game once we have some sort of either advantage, or he knows we've killed a guy out of the middle of the field. He doesn't take near as much risk. And the goal really is to try to balance those two guys out, where I need to, Jesse, go find the red line and then let's pull it back just a little bit. And then with Mark, it's go find the red line and maybe you need to stay there for a little while. So, but certainly, when I go back and diagnose games after tournaments, really that is our weak side right now. Our weak kind of side through the whole year has been the D side. We've managed the snake well. I don't want to say it's been strong for us. We've managed it well. The middle of the field, we've been great. The Dorito side, not so much, Rene Rodriguez, who I know you haven't brought up yet, but I'll just go ahead and bring him up. He's going to get a little more opportunity over there. Okay. Yeah. Renee's going to get a little more opportunity over there. He's, he came to play on Austin Notorious in our D2 year. So I kind of had him through the semi-pro year, and then brought him into AC Diesel this year, and he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunity yet, just simply because I've been trying to really mesh out who is going to be my 4 or 5 studs and then rotate dudes in with them. If you look at the guys I've played, I mean, I've rotated a lot of guys, which I'm not happy about. I want to be able to narrow it to, 7 and then 6. And I really haven't been able to do that just because of the inconsistency in players and the way that they're performing. So Renee's going to get some more opportunities, certainly going into Chicago and World Cup. He's been a fantastic teammate while he hasn't been getting as many opportunities. He's always the first guy standing at the pit gate to grab somebody's gun, give them air, wipe guys off. I mean, he's been a stud for us. So he's going to get some more opportunities, and for a couple of reasons. One, as I mentioned, he deserves it. And the other one is I think that if I do that, the other 2 guys will realize that there's somebody on their heels. And if they want to keep those roles, you better get to work.
Well, and when we look at what's been successful for the teams that have won, so we have, Dynasty's been successful. They've won tournaments. Legion recently successful. Heat's been very consistent. X Factor's been consistent, and then Shock, Impact, even Hurricanes, Tampa Bay Damage has won 2 tournaments in a row recently, past couple seasons last year, and so when I look at the style upon which the D side of those guys play, there is a little bit of a conflicting style. When you look at how Chris Shear plays the D side, whereas how Chad Bougere plays the D side, or Pavel Karslev plays the D side. Those are not the same styles of play. Chris Shear is more of a survivor. He's a great counterpuncher, but he's been incredibly potent for Dynasty as the attacker on the D side because he doesn't die very often, and he's alive to counterattack, and he counterattacks really well. Given and obviously you have 5 different layouts, so we have 5 different types of conversations about when these certain elements of the game were a factor to win the tournament. But recently, Pavel Karslev has been very relentless. I mean, they've been very creative with his routes and getting him up there, but that dude's a missile. He's getting in position. He's recklessly attacking. He's presenting a threat. As we always say, you need threats that people are worried about that get into spots. Snake side, D side, typically middle a little bit too, but depending on layout contingent, and then vets to clean it up. And then, so Karslev's been awesome over there. When Damage is doing well, they also have a consistent D-side threat, whether it's, Jacob Edwards or Chad Bougere, they have, and they get this knock for playing defense, but they take a ton of ground and they only play defense when they're up points. Like Tampa Bay Damage is not ever playing defense really on an offensive field before they go up 2 or 3 points. If they're going to be up 3-1 on you, then they're going to take D2, D3, and they're going to zone it up, but they get into those spots and they still are willing to attack. Ryan Moorhead, Ronnie Dizon, aggressive players for Houston Heat. San Antonio X Factor has had different guys doing it over there. LJ Parrish last year, and now he's doing it for Shock. So it's when you look at what's working on the D side, it's intelligent aggression. And so when I look at a Jesse Stevens and I look at the Iceman Mark Baginski, I'm like, okay, well, I've seen Jesse prevail in these situations before. He's more on the aggressive side of things, and then Baginski's a little bit more on the calculated aggressive side of things. But there has to be some fine line there where you're taking that ground. You have a guy staying alive. He's at a position where he can present a threat and get the shots he needs to draw guns or shoot those bodies cross field, and then set himself up to get into that crucial spot, regardless of what the snake side is. And then your middle close is actually pretty good. I feel like the middle has been a blessing for you guys. And I feel like you guys have had, whether it's Clint or, Mark Johnson, and some people like, oh, why is, Mark Johnson, he shouldn't be getting spins. He's 85 years old. But Mark Johnson's been he's been pretty good for you guys. And then also, you got Kyle Spica, so what are your thoughts on Mark Johnson? What are your thoughts on Kyle Spica? Because some people are like, oh, well, like there was a rumor going around that Spica was going to get cut, but Spica's been getting a decent amount of spins this season. And then Mark Johnson also has, I feel like, been getting the job done more than he hasn't, so talk to me about Spica, talk to me about Mark Johnson, talk to me about Cody Mikowski.
Okay. Yeah. So Mark's been great. He is, he obviously being an owner, player, leader, it's tough for Mark. He has a challenging role. He's been great with me. He doesn't give me a hard time when he doesn't get opportunities to play. But the reality is he's earned a lot of opportunity to play. When we're at practice, Mark is kind of that guy who he'll play every single point. He'll play wherever I tell him to go, and tries a lot of creative things out of it. Mark's been great. He's really, and Mark's always been good through the middle of the field. Always. I mean, again, even back, when I brought him on to Texas Storm in like 2006, he was good through the middle of the field. So Mark's been really good up there. I've thrown Clint up there a few times. I've thrown Jesse Stevens up there a few times, but Mark's probably been the most consistently strong through the middle of the field. So he'll continue to get those opportunities. Kyle, the rumor was interesting. I don't even know how that came about. I know we've had a lot of Mark and I have had a lot of conversations, and Cody. Cody's a leader on this team. So the three of us have had a lot of conversations about Kyle. Most importantly, again, expectations have to be set correctly. They have to be intentional. They have to be well-defined. And all of that, really should be done at the beginning of the season. And so the rumor, I think, of Kyle getting cut was more of us just having a conversation with Kyle that, hey, these are the kind of things we need you to be doing. And we need you to start doing them now, right? Like if it wasn't made clear up front, kind of here's the expectations and here's what I need you to do. And I need you to accept that, right? I need you to tell me, yeah, Brian, coach, I'm in. And of course he did right away. Kyle's he's a great player. He's an incredibly intelligent guy. He helps me a ton with, we had Ryan on before me, and Ryan was talking about, pushing back against the coach. And I don't really consider when players push back against me, I don't really consider it as a pushback as much as I do consider it an opportunity to have a really good conversation and create some synergy around the way the field should be played. That first event we had where we did so poorly, one of the biggest problems with that was I didn't get any pushback from any of the players. Not one player had a passionate, emotional opinion about how the field should be played. I've never in my 30 years of being in paintball, never had an argument with someone about how the field should be played. Never.
That's a problem. That's a problem,
yeah,
though, right?
Problem. Huge problem.
Let's just talk about
huge.
So let's talk about that real quick, because and you and I have had this conversation before off camera, but sometimes when I'm talking to people, I'm like, what type of conversation are we having? Are we having a serious conversation about this? Because if we're having a serious conversation about things, then we're discussing, because if we're having a serious conversation about something, that means that we're having a conversation upon which, like, we're not talking about like wishes and desires and dreams. Those can come in, but we're talking about what can we actually do, and this has been in a lot of different shapes or forms over the years. And that, I feel like that's an incredibly potent thing that has to be discussed, because if you're dealing with a coach and you're looking at this coach and you're like, oh man, Ryan Gray's he's been there so many times and he knows what he's talking about. Like, I can't possibly, argue with him over the game plan, but I feel like this is how this should go. Bring it up, like, let's have a serious conversation about this, because, way it will give, because even though, yes, you are more experienced in a lot of ways than a lot of people, and this is the, and you start pushing back like, I don't know if I want to go there because of X, Y, and Z. Well, that will, even if the person that's coming up with that, the more experienced person that's coming up with that game plan is right about that, that gives them a chance for them to tell you, okay, well, we're doing this because if you go to this spot, you can put pressure on, the tiger, the Godzilla, the whatever, like whatever your guys' names are for things. And you can also do this. And I need you to be able to launch it to here. And this is why we're doing this. And it clarifies in your mind why that's a good idea. And then, but again, it's like, but that pushback is important, because if you're just like, yeah, coach, like you don't want to, like, you want to be a coachable player, but you don't want to be a coachable player to a fault, because if you're an intelligent guy, and you're an intelligent coach, you need that. That's how we come up with good game plans. Again, we just had Ryan Greenspan on. The reason why Dynasty has been so excellent throughout the years is because these elite dudes will have these visceral arguments over, so the layout comes out, and then they're arguing tooth and nail. No, we got to do this, and you're stupid, and like they'll get gnarly about it sometimes. Like, no, you're crazy if you think it's any other way than this. But you got to step up and be like, no, this is the way I think about it, and this is why I think of this. But you can't just say it's this way. You have to say, okay, we have to do this because of this. Therefore, this. It's a very logical way of arguing your point. And so, yeah, man, like if you can't, and if that doesn't happen, well, then you're probably going to get exposed, because the teams that are doing that are going to have a lot more time cerebrally on the chess match side of things to think through those certain angles and those bounce shots and whatever it may be, and to go through those things and go, okay, well, yeah, actually, we probably should do it this way. If we need to get in the snake, if it's, if we're down and we need to get in the snake, this is the best run. If we're up and we need to hold, this is the best play. And you have to be able to have those conversations. And it needs to be, and it can be incredibly vivid. It can be a very bad conversation to have on paper, because it's like, it's the argument. Well, sometimes you got to argue about shit, like anyone that's married, anyone that's been in business with anybody, anyone that's been on a paintball team for a long time, like, yeah, guess what? Sometimes we got to argue about shit, like, and that's just how things are, because I feel very potently that we got to do it this way. And you feel potently that we have to do it this way. And realistically, the way to do it is probably somewhere in the middle, or maybe not, but we don't know until we actually have that conversation.
Yeah. And that's really the recipe for play development. If you don't have everybody who's playing all these different spots participating in that process and bringing really valuable information back, everybody's going to have an opinion that's slightly different than the next person. But that's where being a coach comes in, and we just put the sauce on it, right? That's Kirill likes to say that. You guys just put the sauce on it. He's like, we bring you all the information, we tell you all the different things we see, and you guys just put the sauce on it, right? It's so anytime, and I tell coaches this all the time, like if you have players not participating, make them. Because if they're not, you're robbing them of an opportunity to grow mentally in the game. Because if they're not thinking through all the things that they're seeing, and then what the guy next to them is seeing and saying, and what the guy next to that guy is seeing and saying, you're missing pieces of the game. And then that math, Ryan was talking about being able to put that equation together and do it quickly. If plan A and B fall apart and you have to think on the fly, well, if you haven't participated meaningfully in that process, you're going to miss all of those pieces that you need to do the equation and do it quickly.
Well, and also realistically, if we're talking about realistic stuff, dude, plan A and B a lot of times go out the door too. You got plan A, and then so-and-so gets shot trying to get to the corner, and now it's not really a game plan at all. We're playing paintball. And then you go plan B, and then the dude so let's say plan A is let's get a guy outside wide to the, snake side corner. That guy gets shot. Okay, cool. Well, guess what? Now that game plan doesn't really work, because that guy was doing a job, and that job is now not able to do. So either we fill that spot or we have to just audible. And then you go plan B. Okay, plan B is getting a guy up into D3, and he gets shot off the break. Okay, cool. Now we get the guy out to the outside corner, on the snake side, but now we don't have that guy in D3. What do we do now? So if you're not having these intense conversations about all these different variables based on all these game plans, upon which the coach only has so much information because like you're not playing the point. These points are being played in practice.
Right.
And I need that information. So because I need to let you know, okay, if we lose this guy, which is going to happen a ton, you know, I mean, if you look at, you know, as somebody that watches a ton of paintball, it's like, man, very, very infrequently do we have a situation where the game plan is actually executed perfectly. That's a rare occurrence. You know, like that's just not something that normally goes down. You know, like it's more logical to pursue a learning environment upon which we are predicating all of our knowledge off the fact that this initial game plan is not going to work. You know, so we're setting up the game plan, but I need you to know how to play paintball, you know, like, and this is, you know, and I talk to coaches like you where, you know, this is kind of like when you're coaching different divisions and you know, you're down in D5, the ability to audible is not that great. When you're coaching the pros, their ability to audible is actually really good, you know, and of course, like it's not going to get better than that. But you have to also understand that we're going to be losing bodies on the break, some events more than others. But once that happens, the principle of what we're trying to accomplish here is still the same. So I need you to get a read if we do lose, if you're, you know, the D side 2 and our plan is, you know, predicated upon getting the guy far up on the D side on the break and we lose him. And I need you to head check to the snake side to make sure we didn't lose that guy too. So we're not in a 3-on-5. Because then that's going to throw the game. There's no game plan at that point in time. Now you're in that's why I always tell people to do situational awareness drills, because then you go right into that moment. Anyway, but it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because like as a coach, you only have so much control over what happens out there, because a lot of the times you are in a situation where you are losing a body. And then once you start moving up the field, you know, it's no longer, here's the game plan. You know, it's you need to be able to play basic paintball, man. Like, and I need you to be able to do certain things, you know, control the outside, make sure you don't get shot on an angle. Like the snake, you know, if it's a makeable snake, you know, the snake is always hot. You know, these certain principles, these mandates in the game. What are your thoughts on that as a coach when that doesn't work for you? Because I've seen you after games where you're just like, over the years where you're just wanting to slam your clipboard against your head because you're like, dude, oh, this is driving me crazy. You know, like this is not that difficult. In the sense that here's the game plan. It didn't work out. Okay, well, I need you to play paintball after that. It's 5-on-4. We're not down that many points. You know, like let's say it's a 3-4 game, and then you started off. Here's the game plan. We lose that one body. Like, okay, well, I need you to play paintball after that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the reality is, I hope that we've been in enough scenarios at practice that we don't. Because by the time we get to the tournament, that part of the coaching is kind of over. Like we're still, you know, manipulating things and talking through things, but it's usually like, hey, remember at practice, we did this happened, this is what you have to do. And then also at practice, being able to identify as many if this, then that's as you can. And making sure to document as many of those as possible, running over those in your team meetings. Because you're right. You know, 90% of the time when you call a play, it's not going to go correct, right? Something is going to happen, especially when you're playing the teams that are really dominant off the break, that shoot really well. You're going to play a lot of, and I think we shoot really well off the break. We're one of those teams, I think that, you know, our plus minus off the break this year is really good. I think we're plus 13. So we shoot well off the break too. So it's a lot of times it's, hey, we're probably going to lose this guy, but we're going to probably take this guy or this guy, depending on where I've pointed guns. And then we work the if this, then that from that, right? So it's like in this play, this should be the way it happens. If it doesn't, it could be this. So then this, then that, and trying to put guys in as many of those scenarios. And then again, rehashing them at your meeting on, you know, Thursday night, meeting Friday night, and then hopefully Saturday night too, and putting the new ones in, because everything changes once you get to the tournament, right? Like, you know, I'll go into an event a lot of times with 8 to 12 plays, right? The reality is I end with 5, maybe, right? I end with 5 because you get to the event and a couple of teams are doing something completely different than what you did at practice. And unfortunately, one of those guys are in your pool, and now you got to make some changes. And, that can also throw a lot of things out the window, right? Like if you practice a field and it's you and one other team and you both see the field the same way, like us and Tampa Bay Damage going into the first event, you're setting yourself up for a problem right off the bat, right? So we show up to that first event, and I was like, oh my God, everybody's playing the field differently than us or Damage played it at practice. We're going to have a problem here. And sure enough, we did. So.
Well, before I let you go, because you and I could talk about this all night, but got to ask you about your bracket. Again, you guys are down in tier 4, and we always joke when I'm in these conversations with different coaches and players and teams that it's tough at this point in the game when you have AC Diesel in your bracket and they're down in tier 4, tier 5, or they're down on the tiers, because we don't know what AC Diesel is going to show up. Like, are they going to figure it out and realize who they are, and then all of a sudden become a team that's going to go deep on Sundays? Because if they are, well, dude, you got the bracket of death, bro. Like, you're in a really tough spot, and so you guys are with, and the 3 teams above you are X Factor, Impact, Aftermath, who's had a tough go of it the past 2 events, and then Notorious, a team you're very familiar with, a team that you've coached before. So that's the bracket. It's X Factor, Impact, Aftermath, Diesel, and Notorious. This may be the bracket of death, because Notorious is going to get back ABJ, and ABJ has been a force multiplier out there. And they had a rough go of it at the last one, which they actually did really well considering how many knocks they had to their starting lineup. And then you get Impact, who's fired up, and they've had a pretty good run of it. I'm shocked they're still down in tier 2, but hey, man, it's like tough to be in the top tier. It's Legion, Heat, X Factor, and Dynasty in the top tier. So, and then you get Aftermath, who 4th place at the first event, not making Sunday the past 2. They're going to be fired up. They have a field they're like PB Fit. I mean, Aftermath plays a lot of paintball, and then which you had talked about as one of your main themes to get your team locked in. So before I let you go, I got to ask you about this bracket, because coming up on the Windy City with 2 more events to go, Diesel is one of the more compelling stories for me, and it's going to continue to be that way until either roster drastically changes, or you guys start to, and even if you guys start to make the runs that you should make, I mean, that intensifies the story, because, Diesel is one of the highest paid teams. They have an insane roster. They got a great coach with you. I mean, it's like, it's tailor-made for greatness, so, but with this bracket with X Factor, Impact, Aftermath, Diesel, Notorious, I'm like, oh man, I looked at these brackets and I'm like, that's a rough bracket, dude. That's a really rough bracket. So before I let you go, your thoughts on the bracket and how you think you guys are going to do with this one. So my questions are always,
man, we've been at
1, 2. Who's going to be first, and then does a wild card come out of this one? And then who do you think it's going to be?
Yeah. So we've been in gnarly brackets all year. I mean, we've not had a bracket the entire season.
Well, you make
thank God we're in that one.
You make the bracket. Yeah, but Brian, no, I'm sorry, but you make the bracket gnarly, because anytime you got Diesel's in a bracket, we're like, oh, well, they got Diesel down at tier 5 or tier 4. God bless you, like vaya con Dios, because if they get good, it's going to be a rough one.
But the reality is that's where we belong right now. That's where we've played, and that's the way our performances have been. We belong where we are right now, and it's terribly unfortunate. There will be a tipping point. It's going to happen. This, again, I believe in this group, and it could be this event. It could be this event. Our matches against X Factor are always really good. We had they beat us up pretty good at the first event. We played them at the last event, lost in overtime, got a minor penalty off the break in the overtime point, pretty much sealed it. We haven't played Impact this season, but I am excited to play them because they are playing well. I feel like, too, they kind of play in a very similar style that we do, so I think we match up well with Impact. They like to play in the blinds a lot. They've got a lot of guys that play really aggressive early and then kind of hit the brakes. So I'm excited to see how we match up with them, because I think we'll match up well. We played Aftermath at the last 2 events and had some success with them. They're playing a little bit slower style. I think if they don't change that tempo thing, kind of like I was talking about with us, they're going to have a little bit of a challenge. And then, Austin Notorious is going to get ABJ and Carter. I think they were missing 2 or 3 starters from the last event. Yeah. So they'll get both those guys back. And I think, Michael Johnson has done a good job for them. He's an Oklahoma kid, so I'm excited to see him doing well. Logan has played well for them. So, but I know Austin Notorious so well that I feel really confident in that we can take care of business with them, right? Especially if we're playing at a higher tempo, I think we can put up a few points against them. The way I see the bracket laying out, and it's so hard this year because everybody but San Antonio X Factor who's in this pool has been very inconsistent, including us, right? Like Edmonton Impact has been all over the place. Aftermath has been all over the place. We've not, I don't want to say been all over the place, but made it, 20th, make Sunday at the next event, 13th at the next event. So Notorious has kind of been up and down, obviously not having a great event at the last event. X Factor really is I think X Factor probably wins the bracket. I'm going to say we're going to be the second team, and Impact is going to be the wild card.
Dude, that would be crazy because if Impact comes, that would be a big statement to the league. Because if X Factor, that's a safe bet. They've been, the 3rd overall. They've been incredibly consistent this year. 6th, 2nd, 6th, and then you guys are due at some point in time, I feel like, to strike and become one of these top level teams. And it's been a while. So, people are like, oh, it's never going to happen, or it is going to happen. It's a dividing line, there are certain people that are very rabid about one thing or the other when it comes to Diesel. But that's why, to me, when I look at, if I had to put a camera on a team behind the scenes, I'd be like, dude, cover Diesel, because Diesel has a lot to lose and they got a lot to win right now. So it's going to be very, very captivating to see what happens to them. And they're in a tough bracket because, again, Notorious is going to get 2 of their starters back. And Aftermath is, hungry to not, miss 3 Sundays in a row. And then Impact is on an upswing, and X Factor, I feel that's a team that would not shock me at all if they won a tournament in the past, in the next 2. If they won Chicago or World Cup, that would not surprise me at all. And I feel like a lot of people that watch the game would probably say the same thing. So, the wild card here is Diesel's performance. And that seems to be the same story for you guys in these divisions. It's like if Diesel plays really well, that's the bracket of death. If it's not, then okay, well, we'll see which other bracket is going to be tougher. But yeah, it's going to be really fun to watch.
I will tell you, bracket A and bracket D both look brutal to me.
Yeah, well, I feel bad. I feel bad for New York Extreme because they're on the precipice of getting relegated. So New York Extreme needs 2 decent finishes to not get relegated. And bracket A is nasty with Legion, Hurricanes, Revo, Ironman, and New York Extreme. Ironman went 3rd and last at the last 2 events. Revo and Hurricanes, we know how good they are. They're out for redemption. Hurricanes is out for redemption because they've missed 2 Sundays after the 2nd place. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your guys' bracket, and you're right, Ryan. I don't even know if that's the bracket of death because it just, as every time we talk about the bracket of death, the conversation really has to revolve around how good, because we know, like, Legion's, the top 2 tiers, you're there for a reason, So it's and there's been some slop in the placing with some of these top teams missing a Sunday here or there. So that's part of the conversation. But you're in the top 2 tiers for a reason. Those bottom tiers, how good those teams end up, because if New York Extreme getting all their starting lineup back now off injury and craziness, okay, well, if they show up and they play like we've seen them play before, and then the Ironmen play like the 3rd place team, and the Revo, Hurricanes, and Legion play like we've seen them, then yeah, that's the bracket of death. D could also be ridiculous too, but B is rough as well because Uprising just picked up Nate Schrader. Blast Camp's made a Sunday. Bears have made every Sunday. Every 2 Sundays and missed the third one by 1. So, like, as far as brackets of death on this one, like, this is the hardest one to call all year, which is no surprise because we're in Chicago.
Agreed.
And, like, this is when it gets started. Yeah, this is when it starts to get really, really difficult. Anyway, Ryan, I get to keep you here all night, dude. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, man, to keep the fires lit over there with Diesel. Make sure everyone checks out the Coaches Show. Tuesdays is when you guys are doing your thing live.
Yep, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time. Me and my brother from another mother, Mike Bianca from the New Orleans Hurricanes. We mostly go live. Sometimes we'll do a 10 a.m. show if we are, which is not live. It'll be a pre-recorded show. Like if we have somebody from Europe on, like we just had Vincent Lemeltier, who's the coach of Scalp. We just had him on. So we put that show up at 10 o'clock in the morning so our European viewers could see it first. But yeah, every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Awesome, man. Always great to touch base with you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And remember, next event going down September 13th through the 15th, the Windy City Major. This is historically the hardest, second hardest event to win because of all these things we just talked about.
Absolutely.
It gets really difficult as we start to get through the season. And this is always a fun one to watch. So we appreciate your attention and keep spreading the word. You know, we're doing this for you guys. As we always say with Go Sports, I mean, we're trying to take this to another level, but we can't do it without your support because your support dictates how much, you know, we can actually do. And that is very, very much a real thing. Just was in the studio completing the 60-minute version of the Major League Paintball TV show, which we hope will be airing. Not sure what the times are going to be on that yet, but we're just trying to keep the fires lit moving forward. So appreciate all you guys' attention and all your efforts. And Ryan, best of luck, brother. Take care.
Thank you, man.
They won't let me in. Who running the game now? Foot on the gas, can slow down. No, my team, we holding it down. We know we running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Yeah.